Hello, people. Andrew here, talking about comics from a reader, collector, speculator, investor point of view, in that order of importance to myself. And today I'm going to be looking at the Ultimate Fantastic Four. So, by the time the year 2000 came along, the comic book industry had gone through the boom and bust of the 90s, and those companies that were survived after that were finding a way to pick up the pieces. Comic sales at the beginning of the 90s were, over $1 billion, and by the end of it, it was down to like 25% of that. So there was an effort to recapture those that had left, like longtime fans, as well as to entice or bring in some new fans that were not part of that whole 90s movement at all. So they had a difficult time over at Marvel with the idea that, well, by the year 2000, many of their characters were, close to 40 years old. And this 40 years included a lot of history and a lot of lore. Somebody new coming in to read, say, The Amazing Spider-Man, and then you read about Spider-Man versus Dr. Octopus, and then they discover that these two have met before. And then they track that back if they can, and they find out that they met before that too. That there's this entire history involving Spider-Man, his supporting cast, as well as all of the villains. And it might be a little bit daunting for a new reader to come on board and to understand that now there's 40 years of history behind these characters. The second problem was that the characters have aged. Now, may not physically look like they've aged, and perhaps only in the book terms over that 40 years they aged maybe 5 years, possibly 10. Still, they had more of an adult approach to things, and they had history, as I say, with these villains, and they had tactics and techniques that they had used before. Spider-Man, if you're Peter Parker, if you're reading him, in the 2000s, he's no longer the quirky outside teenager. No, he's an adult now. He's married. He's got a career partly as a photojournalist, and rather than attending school, he's now teaching at school. He's got money issues. He's got elderly parent issues. He always had the elderly parent issues as well, but now he takes on a deeper responsibility. These are more adult concepts, and the feeling at Marvel, at least, was that a young teenager, may not be so interested in that kind of approach. So the idea was, suggested by Bill Jemas, that they create a new universe full of new characters that would cater to this younger audience. But a track record, if you take a look at something actually called the new universe in Marvel, failed dismally. It just, there were reasons why, and someday we'll get into that, but it did not work. It was all new characters that had nothing to do with the mainframe characters here, but it didn't succeed. So the second idea was, okay, how about we create a second universe using the standard recognized characters? And we won't retell the stories, which was what they tried to do with Heroes Reborn. We will genuinely reimagine these characters. They'll be a little bit younger. They'll be starting off, and we'll grow with them. So they created a second universe called the Ultimate Universe. And they started with a title of Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man, and then it was the X-Men. Then it was the Ultimates, which were the Avengers of the Ultimate Universe. And finally, in 2004, there was Fantastic Four. The series sold really well, and often people were saying, do you read the Ultimate Spider-Man or just the regular Spider-Man? Because they both did really well in sales. So the Ultimate Universe was off to a good start. So here we go with the 2004. They came up with the Ultimate Fantastic Four. It's a 60-issue run, and with 2 annuals. Couple of differences right away. When you take a look at the Ultimate Spider-Man, for over 100 issues, it featured one writer, Brian Michael Bendis, and one artist, Mark Bagley. In the 60-issue run of Ultimate Fantastic Four, it went through 5 writers and 7 artists. So there were more tonal shifts within the Ultimate Fantastic Four than there were in, say, the Ultimate Spider-Man. Even X-Men had different writers and artists, but they had longer blocks, and that was a 100-issue run. But here, we're talking about the Ultimate Fantastic Four, and this first one is actually co-written by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Millar, and illustrated actually by Adam Kubert, and this is a Brian Hitch cover. Adam Kubert, I was never really aware so much about his artwork. I know of his father, Joe Kubert, but not so much his work, and he did a really good job within this 6-issue run. This first opening 6-issue run is the origin of the Fantastic Four, and as I say, it's written by Bendis and Millar. Now, they have different approaches to telling a story. Millar is more cinematic. He has big scope visuals and ideas. You could almost take this, and thanks to the artist as well, as a storyboard for a film, because that's his cinematic view of things. Bendis is much more of a reality TV type of guy. And I'm not saying this in a bad way, just much more about conversations, dialogue between characters, observations of daily life type of thing. So it was interesting to have these two voices work together on Ultimate Fantastic Four. Again, Millar is probably a little bit darker, a little bit more critical of the superheroes in the world that they live in, whereas Bendis is actually, I find him just in some cases, especially in the Spider-Man book, a little more hopeful, a little bit more awe and wonder type of thing. So, interesting combo to have. Did it work for the first 6-issue arc? And yeah, the one thing that I really liked about this arc, it's the same thing that I liked about my very first video, when I didn't have the lighting and the microphone, when I talked about Hawk and Dove and their 5-issue miniseries in the 80s, was that it took all that 5 issues to sort of explain and create the team between Hawk and Dove. It didn't just happen automatically. It's the same thing that I find with Ultimate Fantastic Four. It takes 6 issues to really bring the team together as the Fantastic Four. I like the characterization. We start off with a young Reed Richards. He's like only 14 or something like that, and then he's doing scientific experiments. We get background on him and his father, who just doesn't understand him. I don't even think his father likes him. He doesn't beat him or anything, but he's always yelling at him and cursing him and what have you. And Reed is just this. He can't help it. He's a scientific fella, and he works on these scientific projects. He gets noticed because he's so brilliant. Over to the Baxter Building for the think tank happening there, and from there he develops something that's supposed to be working just fine. This is where he also meets Sue Storm and her brother Johnny and Victor Von Dam, I think they call him now. And they work on a project that ultimately creates the Fantastic Four. A good 6-issue starting point for the origin. So then, that's it. That's it for Bendis and Millar. Now we got Warren Ellis and Stuart Immonen. Is that his? Immonen. Okay. Stuart Immonen, whose artwork is great too. So the art is good. And this story, Warren Ellis, I like Warren Ellis. And this is his 6-issue arc about, Doom, Dr. Doom. Now, Dr. Doom has changed as well. He's a younger man to begin with. He was the same age pretty much as Reed Richards, who at the beginning of it was about 19 or so, maybe 20. So he's a younger man as well, and he doesn't start off as the monarch of Latveria. He's a different character and affected by the same not cosmic, but the same effect that transformed the Fantastic Four. And it's a good story. It's a good 6-issue arc to introduce him and to see. He's much more. I find him more vengeful than in the primary title. In the primary title, he is vengeful. He does hate Reed Richards and that, but he's also very much in tune with the idea that he wants to be king of the world, king of the universe type of thing. And he will, forego vengeance if it means that he can further a bigger goal. Whereas this one, he's very, right now, because he's so young, very, very vengeful. good 6-issue run about introducing Doctor Doom. And again, good artwork. But, you know, that changes again. This is the last issue of that particular arc, and it's the first time Doom is featured on the cover of the Ultimate Fantastic Four. You notice all of these beginning arcs just start with a picture of the Fantastic Four. Okay, so this is the third arc, and again, Ellis is writing it, and we're back to Adam Kubert as the artist. So again, I'm happy with the writing artist team. This is one of the best of the 6-issue arcs. This is the introduction of Annihilus and the whole traveling into the negative zone. One of the things that I find about the characterization here is that Reed is really, he's the brilliant scientist that he is, but I also find he's far more reckless than he is in the primary. He takes very large chances without fully examining potential consequences. Gets into a lot of trouble throughout the entire series. And ultimately, as time goes on, I find that I don't like the character. That's okay. I mean, not all characters are supposed to be nice, but here he's still got some of his humanity, and I think he starts to lose that as time goes on. Characterization as well. I think Sue Storm is a strong character right at the outset. Johnny is pretty much stays Johnny for the same way that he is in the primary. He's just like just free spirited. Ben Grimm is a little bit more mournful. He's more of a tragic story. And they develop his character, and it does take some dark turns. But unfortunately, that's left in the dust, and we'll get to when that happens. But there is characterization developing, and I like the different characters and the different tones that they're taking with the characters. I also think it's interesting that the Storm's father plays a big role. He's a big supporting character, at least in the first half, and we'll get to that as well. So this is the Annihilus run, and I consider it one of the best runs in the entire series. Annihilus is I always found him to be a menacing villain, and he should be treated as such. But in here, he's particularly menacing. So I enjoyed this run. I'm just showing this cover, which is the second book of that run, because I like that cover. I know it's fairly simple. It's just a picture of Ben Grimm and his grim face and all that sort of stuff as the thing, but I still think it's a great cover. Here is a little surprise. There's only 2 issues here. Again, we're switching to different writer-artists. We got Mike Carey and Jay Lee doing this little 2-issue thing. I really liked this 2 issues. If I'm going to recommend just 2 issues of this, read these 2 issues. This is Think Tank. This is a reimagining of the Mad Thinker. The Mad Thinker in the primary, I never really found him to be too threatening or menacing. I mean, he's always based on probabilities. I knew you were going to do that because I figured out the probabilities of this and that and the other thing. But every time that he does this, something happens that is improbable or breaks that sort of streak, and that's what sends him to prison and makes his whole plans fall apart. And you would think that maybe he includes somewhere in there the probability so that something improbable would happen. Regardless, I don't find him as the first part of his thing tends to work out, but it's always that little improbability that changes for him and sends him packing. This one is a little bit different. This Mad Thinker is, she's mad right at the get-go. She's got something wrong with her mentally. Like psychotic mentally, and she's very intelligent, and she's very evil, very very dark. It's kind of a dark two issues, but very gripping. She is a terrifying Mad Thinker, and I again, this is one of the better arcs within the entire series. Remember, it's written by Mike Carey, and that'll come back. So this one, 19 and 20, thought it was great. Even the cover to 20 I thought was kind of interesting. You see a lot of the shots of the Fantastic Four, but I find that this one was an interesting take on that as well. All right, this is the series that most people talk to and most people refer to, or the arc, I should say, that most people refer to when they think about the Ultimate Fantastic Four, because this is the introduction of the Marvel Zombies. And again, we've switched. Who are we now? We're Mark Millar and Greg Land. There we go. Greg Land, I like his artwork, but some people are a little bit off on it because they say, well, it's kind of plagiarized. He traces images from magazines, from porn sites, from whatever to come up with his images, and they have a kind of a static look to it. And again, it's like tracing, but he's gonna add other things to that tracing, and he's got to put it into the positions necessary to tell the story. And I think some people, and I can see it too, that sometimes that the images don't quite fit the narrative because they just don't. The action scenes are a little bit off. But overall, it's a technique. It's people do freehand, people do tracing, or use photos to create the images. People use computer generated images now in artwork. So it's just another form of art, and I think he does it really well. And I like his artwork, so I liked his time on the Fantastic Four. I think he worked for 9 issues. And as I say, this is the beginning of the zombie run. They show up on the last panel of this one here. I won't get into the story. It's a good little story. This is the official, well, not official, but this is the first full appearance of zombies. And how can you go wrong with this, right? You get to see all of the Marvel characters, well, not all of them, but a whole bunch of Marvel superheroes all turn into zombies, with ghouling faces and stuff like that. There's a cover I'll show you in a minute of all these heroes and what have you, with Magneto, of all people, being the hero of this alternate world. And the final of that particular zombie run, which I like this cover as well. Again, you can see some of the posing, but if you want to really talk about the posing, this was the end of the zombie run, the first zombie run. The next 3 issues, again, we're staying with the same artist and writer, but this is an example of Greg Land taking a photo. Tell me that doesn't look like an ad for a men's cologne. Or a number of things, a vacation spot, something else, but really I could see that being a men's cologne ad or men's underwear ad for that matter. It's just, it is posed like that. This was the arc involving Namor. It was interesting in that Sue Storm's mother comes back into the fold, into the story. An interesting character, an interesting development there. I don't know that I'm crazy about this whole storyline here, but it was all right. Actually, I guess they did more. I guess maybe they did 12, because this is the zombie. No, this is the Skrull. This is a time travel flippy floppy thing that involves Skrulls and Thor as the president of the world, and everybody getting superpowers, and it didn't. It was all right. It was, take it with a grain of salt. This is the Super Skrull down here. It was all right. And the final run by Greg Land and Mark Millar is another follow up to the zombie storyline there, and you can see Sue Storm as a zombie down there. And up at the top corner, you got Reed. You got all of the Fantastic Four as zombies. It was a decent enough story. I liked the zombie storyline, and actually I liked this particular block of 12 books. It was a good block. But then things change. Then we get another change. We get Mike Carey and Pascal Ferry. And they do pretty much the run till we get to the ultimatum at the very end. As I said, Mike Carey wrote the Mad Think, or the Think Tank 2 issues, which I thought was like one of the best series. But from here on in, I don't care for his tales. I think he works best when he's on a smaller scale. But moving forward from here, much of this is cosmic. This one here is this is the Thanos and Ronan, Ronan is now Thanos' son. So it's a more cosmic type of storyline, and I don't think he's that good at telling a cosmic tale. The art doesn't. I'm not one way or the other about the artwork. I find the art in the previous issues much more interesting. This was just okay. So I didn't care for the cosmic tone. I just didn't think he could tell a good story. And one of the things that I really disliked was the lack of characterization. Everybody seemed to lose all of that. Johnny Storm most of the time gets beaten right at the outset and is hardly a factor in any of these stories. The Thing just grumbles along. He was going through an interesting time and an interesting story arc under Mark Millar. But that's totally dropped. We don't hear about that anymore. Sue Storm stays strong, which is good. But their parent, her father, just disappears pretty much completely out of the storyline. He's no longer a factor. So some of these things that were being built upon in the first 30 issues or so, 32 issues, they're abandoned for these cosmic storylines, with Reed making so many bad choices, despite the fact that they've explained that his mind has actually expanded, because that's just the nature of his being. Not only can he stretch his body, but he can stretch his mind. But he makes bad decision after bad decision and becomes a very unlikable character. I can't say that I liked the second half of the Ultimate Fantastic Four. So the next cosmic storyline involves the Silver Searcher, not the Silver Surfer, the Silver Searcher, and Psycho Man. There was a couple of issues. There was one issue that was decent in this run that I found was decent, but it just not what I'm looking. The cosmic. I get that we're Fantastic Four do some cosmic stuff, but we've abandoned so much of the stuff that made them a good quartet. Now we're just telling cosmic stories and reintroducing some of these or established characters as fan service or to get them on board, but I didn't care for it. There was a couple of other issues in there where it dealt with Diablo. Yeah, and there was one that dealt with the Red Ghost. The Red Ghost one wasn't bad, but again, the Red Ghost storyline, it was much smaller. It wasn't cosmic. It was like one person who's had a plan to change the world, but she hadn't gotten anywhere close to making that happen. And so this was that story. And again, because it was a smaller scale story, I found it to be far more interesting. Ultimately, we deal with Thanos again and the Cosmic Cube and bad decisions made by Reed Richards. It just didn't work for me. And this went on till issue 57, I guess. 57 of this run. And then we finally get another change in writer and artist. Joe Pokaski and Tyler Curran are responsible for the final 3 issues of this run, and it's part of the Ultimatum. Now, to be honest, I can't really talk about the Ultimatum until I talk about the Ultimatum miniseries, because this is just part of it. This doesn't even end. I mean, the Fantastic Four comes to an end with issue number 60, but it's not the end of the Fantastic Four storyline. That happens in the Ultimatum short story. So you're not even getting the full story of how this team comes to an end unless you read that. So overall, what do I feel about reading it? Well, as I said, the first 32 issues are worth a read. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I really like the character developments. I really liked the artwork. I like the direction it was heading. I like the young Fantastic Four willing to take some chances and experiments in the beginning and untest their powers untested and unsure of what's to do, and an examination of their powers. and how they fit into the world. I really liked the way that was going. Plus, you also got the whole Marvel Zombies storyline, which was a lot of fun, and that creepy Mad Thinker and extraordinarily villainous Annihilus. So yeah, so the first 32 issues of this are definitely worth a read. The second half, from 33 to 60, I found it pale in comparison. I thought there was a couple of good moments in there. I thought the Red Ghost storyline wasn't too bad, but overall, it's not. It didn't have the same effect that the first 32 issues did. As far as collections are concerned, it'll fit into your Ultimate collection. It'll fit into your Fantastic Four collection. Greg Land, Warren Ellis, Mark Millar, Brian Michael Bendis, even Stuart Immonen. They have followings as well. You could be tracking down even Doctor Doom variations of Doctor Doom or any of the other characters that I mentioned, following for that sort of situation. As far as speculation is concerned, well, the only ones, and again, are the zombie books. So this is your first appearance of the Marvel Zombies. This is your first full appearance of the Marvel Zombies. And then this is the third one that wraps up the first story arc. And it's the first two that have gotten some traction as far as speculation or, investment type of view. Which one is the better of the two? They're both, once again, it's most of these will be in high grade condition. I don't necessarily think that you should seal it up in plastic. A 9.8 would be sweet, but you can get them. This is a 9 something, and I just have it in a bag, and you can pick it up for, I don't know, $20 to $30 maybe a little bit more for this one. But around that kind of price. They're the ones that tend to be a little bit more expensive. It cost me a little bit more to get issue number 30, which features the Fantastic Four as zombies on the cover. But I probably paid a little bit too much for it, but I needed that one to complete this series, so that's partly why I paid for it. Most of this you're going to find in the dollar bin. The first issue you could find in the dollar bin. You might have to spend a little bit more somewhere else, but it's quite possibly that there's, in a bargain bin somewhere, there's an Ultimate Fantastic Four #1. It's not an expensive series. 21 and 22 are the expensive ones. 30 has a little bit of value to it, but again, not entirely expensive. Would I speculate, or what's this one? I like this cover. Would I speculate on buying those? If I found a zombie 21 or 22, if I found one at a reasonable price right now, I would probably buy a second copy of it. But I'm not going to go out of my way to buy a second copy for $30 to $50. If you don't have a copy of it, those are the ones that you might want to concentrate on, is 21 and 22. So that's it for the Ultimate Fantastic Four. As I say, good first half, not so good the second half. But I really enjoy the first half. The first half is definitely worth a read. So thanks for listening. Hope to see you again soon. Next time out, I'm not sure where we'll be with the Fantastic Four. But until then, take care of yourselves.